Well, here we go. A lovely Wraysbury morning and a lovely Wraysbury carp. Look at him, he's beautiful, isn't he? He's not a monster, but one day he might well be. It's funny when you hold fish like this, these beautiful, dark, scaly ones, and think back to, you know, where them big uns came from. They all started out like this, didn't they? They're all stuck by someone at some stage and turned into Mary and Mary's mate and Sonny and I and Two-Tone and what have you. Hopefully one day he's going to grow into one of the monsters that I love to chase. So sometimes I sit here and I wonder, why? Why do I actually make it so hard for myself fishing lakes like this? Seems to be all the lakes that I target in recent years got one thing in common, and that's that they're hard for whatever reason, whether it's a low stock lake, whether they're very clued up fish that have been fished for years, or whether like this, the lake's huge. I mean, this place is 140 acres. It's got a fair head of fish in it, but the ones that I want to catch are very much in the minority. And the only answer I can come up with is that I enjoy it. I could go to a lake now, ping out some floaters and probably catch myself a carp, but just catching a carp has never really been my driving thing. You know, when I go home from here tomorrow, within a few hours, I'll be thinking about, probably on the way home, I'll be thinking about the next attack and what it is I'm going to do, and if I tried this, or if I baited there, or the weather will change and I think, oh, the fish will be going here, or they'll be moving there, or using this weed bed, or maybe in the snags. I think with these big pits, there's so much going on. There's there's what's in front of you, but then over there, there's another 40 acres behind me. There's another 20, 30 acres. There's bays at the back. There's stuff everywhere, and I think that's what makes it so interesting for me. If you can see all of a lake from any one swim, I don't know, it just sort of lacks a little bit in my mind anyway. I like the drive of thinking there's always something around the corner. If it's not happening in front of me now, then it must be happening somewhere else. So I'll go off and explore, walk, in this case boat, looking snags, looking weed beds, check baited areas. At the moment, unfortunately, we've got a bit of an algae bloom, but when the water's clear, I have various patches all baited up, and I'll go out there with a glass bottom bucket. I'll have a look down, see if anything's, fed on any of the baited patches, top them up or fish them, whatever. There's always something to do on a lake like this. I mean, don't get me wrong, a lot of the time you are sitting and waiting, especially this time of year. I mean, middle of summer, it's 30 degrees today. There's absolutely no way I'm getting a bite today at this time of day. I know that. In reality, there's probably 20 hours between bite times. Which is a long old day, but you've got to be here for those 4 hours when it's right, and you've got to have your rigs in position, you've got to have everything settled in, your bait's got to be down there, the fish are undisturbed. And I think that's the drive with these places. It's just so interesting, hard, but interesting, and I like that. Something keeps the mind ticking over. And also with lakes like this, it's the sort of longevity of it. It's the overall challenge of the lake. There's specific fish in here that I want to catch. I've caught a few of them. There's one in particular, a fish called Scaly, that lives in here. He's a sort of 40-pound, nearly fully scaled fish, beautiful fish, king of the pond. I haven't caught him. I find it very hard to walk away from places if I haven't caught what I'm after. I suppose I'm stubborn. I'm sure the missus would say I'm stubborn. I'm very stubborn, actually. I get something in my sights and I just keep going and going until I get it. Like I said, I touched on earlier, I could go somewhere now and catch a carp, but it would be a carp. I don't fish for carp, I fish for specific animals, if you like, certain characters that I want to catch, and to me that's what carp fishing is. That's what my carp fishing is. It's sort of targeting certain creatures, if you like, and every now and again you get a glimpse of them in the water and you just think, I so want to catch you, I really want to catch you. And it's hard to just get up and walk away from something when he's still swimming around in there. I mean, at the moment, you know, he's made a mug of me, but there'll be a day when I look in the net and I think, haha, today's my day. And that's what keeps me going on these, just waiting for that day. Every dog has its day, they say. Hopefully, one day soon, this dog will have his day, because, you know, I'm on my 3rd year on here. That fish has been caught 2 or 3 times in that period, but not by me. But my turn will come, I'll get him. So when I think about these fish that I target, you know, you could ask why, you know, because it's not always size. This one I'm after now is a 40 pounder. That's a big fish, don't get me wrong. You know, 40 pounds big in anybody's eyes, but in the world today, you know, in the UK today, there's a lot of 50 pounders, lots of 50 pounders. And I could be targeting a 50s, you know, just to get the number up and say I've caught this many 50s or this many 45 pluses or whatever, but that's not really what it's about. I look at the fish individually for what they are and what they've been and how long they've been around. You know, they've got to be old fish. They've got to have character. They've got to look the part. You know, there's lakes around that have got huge fish in that are just quite plain. You know, it might, you know, I don't know. I'm not putting any other lakes down, but, you know, I'd rather fish a lake with 20 fish in there. You've got one fairly big one that's old as the hills, black as you're at, beautiful deep set scales, maybe one really nice common, you know, and a few other sort of 30 pounders that are real ancient. And I don't mind, you know, if they've got a twisted swim bladder, a pop rib, a boggle eyes, whatever. To me, that adds to it, you know, that is their character. That makes them what they are, makes them something special. And that's sort of how I target fish. I'll see a photo of a fish and just think, my God, that's amazing. Find out where it lives, and if everything else is right, you know, if the lake's like this, beautiful, quiet, you know, angler-wise quiet, then I'll think, oh yeah, I could probably have a couple of years on there. I don't like fishing with lots of other people. I do like a bit of peace and quiet. I like a lot of real estate. I like to move a lot. I like to be able to get around and do my own thing. I like to be able to bait spots without worrying about who's going on them the next day or the next week or at the weekend or whatever. You know, probably a bit selfish like that. I like the whole place to myself, me and the dog. That suits me. And there's not a lot of that about nowadays. So I probably fish for, or probably target, smaller fish than the national average big fish, if you like, because they're also living in an environment which suits me. And that's a lot of it. I've got to be happy where I sit. It's no good just sitting somewhere just for big fish. I've got to be happy with what I fish for, and I've got to be happy where I'm sat, like here, on a little island, minding my own business, targeting Mr. Scaly. When I think back of some of the fish I've targeted, some of those, I don't know, campaign's a terrible word, but you know what I mean. Some of those missions that I've been on over the years, they all mean different things for different reasons, but I suppose realistically the black mirror was the one. You know, that's the ultimate fish to target, or was the ultimate fish to target. God bless him, he's gone now. For everything, just for everything that was involved in it. That, you know, the place was unbelievable. It was savage. You know, I remember writing that it's almost like the lake didn't want you there. Everything was against you at all times. I mean, obviously you shouldn't have been there in the first place, but I was. And I don't see how I could have stayed away, to be honest. Once you've seen that fish in the water, you know that you've got to have it. It was a hell of a fish, just such a special carp. I remember once seeing it on a real shallow bar. It's about 2 or 3 foot of water, gin clear. I was hanging out this little tree, and he came out of these snags and he came over this shallow bit of gravel and he cast his own shadow. It was like sunny, bright day, and he cast this shadow, which was twice as big as him, underneath. And I could see every scale, every marking on him. I remember looking at him down there in this clear water, and I was scared. I just thought, there is no way I can land that carp on this flimsy bit of like monofilament I was using at the time. How the hell? It's like, just outclasses me beyond. 7 years I was after that fish. On and off, I did lots of other things. I didn't fish there for I've never fished anywhere for 7 years straight. You know, some years I only went for a few weeks, some years I went for a few months, and fished lots of other lakes, good big lakes in between. But from first seeing him to then banking him, it was a 7-year period. And that was very, very special to me. He was the king of them all. He really was. And when he finally came, that black mirror, Christ, that was a night. I'd been baiting for ages on this little hump in this swim, waiting for the weather. Sometimes you just got to have everything in your favour, really. And I knew when I think it was a southeasterly from memory. When it blew, it would blow into this corner. I've been baiting it, you know, aware that the fish were probably using it, but I wanted it to be absolutely bang on when I fished it. And I see this weather front coming in, and I went up there and I got the rods all sorted, which was a mission, an absolute mission. It was the last trip my dinghy ever took. It was almost like a pancake by the time I got it back to the bank. But I'd got my rods out there, got everything exactly right. Middle of the night, scream intake, hooked this fish. It wasn't in my mind, maybe this is the black mirror. It was just, you know, I'd got a fish. My overriding thing at the time I was playing it was keeping it away from the other two lines, because I couldn't put them back out there if they got wiped out, and I was really giving this fish some stick. I could hear it exploding on the surface out there. Had I known, you know, what it was going to be while I was playing it, then I might have been a bit more sort of tentative with it. But just basically bullied it in as much as I could. It was just roaring. And when it had gone in the net, I sort of lifted the arms of the net, and the tail was still poking out the top, and I could see that the old classic cut off the top of the tail. And that feeling, that moment, just looking in there, I just completed a never-ending mission. It was like I was never actually going to catch him. That was my drive, was to catch the black mirror, but I don't know whether I got to a stage where I thought I'm probably never going to catch him. But to look in the net and see that I'd caught it, it was unbelievable. Especially so as I wasn't expecting it to be him. And then suddenly it was, and it was like this 7-year mission was suddenly over. And I'd caught the black mirror, and I was just, it was mental. You know, I remember standing in the middle of the night on my own in the margins, dancing. I was so pumped up. I made a few phone calls, a couple of close mates came down to do the photos and that. And when I've got video of when we undone the sack and just sort of exposed him to the light there on my mat. Oh, wow, what a moment. And it was a mixture of everything. It was relief that I was done with the mirror, because it's hard work, or it was really, really hard work. It was this euphoria, this buzz, this adrenaline rush. That I'd caught the black mirror, you know, still seems mad now. It's a mixture of everything, you know, the emotions were just flying about. It was a hell of a moment. I don't know if I'm ever going to duplicate that, to be honest. Even catching some of the fish, other big fish I've caught, you know, they're all very special in their own right, but the black mirror was something else, really was. Problem with me is, when I get that fish, you know, I may have been a year, 2 years, 7 years, however many years, targeting that one fish. I'm not a planner. I don't have a little black book full of big carp that are next. I don't work like that. I become very focused on what I'm doing, total tunnel vision. I never really think beyond that, outside the box, other waters, what's about. I've got no idea what, you know, some people have got amazing memories for carp. They take it all in, they read all the, you know, the social media, the magazines, they know what lives out there. I haven't got a clue. You know, after catching the black mirror, I didn't have a clue where to go. After catching the Burghfield Common, not a Scooby, no idea at all. You know, I've actually phoned mates, close mates, and said, what's out there? You know, what would suit me? I've caught blah, blah, and I haven't got no idea at all where I'm going next. It's not, I can't do that forward planning. I think a lot of that is if I knew about another fish and knew how it was progressing and knew that place was amazing and right for me, I'd struggle, you know? I'd struggle to be where I am and know that that was there, and I'd want to go there as well. And you can't do that, or I can't do that. I can't fish two waters at once. It's got to be all or nothing. So I just put everything else out of my mind, do what I'm doing, and when it's done, it's like a big shock. And I'm like, oh my God, now I've got to find somewhere to fish. But that's a nice situation to be in. I don't know at what point I became this obsessive over sort of, I don't know whether single fish targeting's the right terminology really, because I'm not here for, I didn't come here for a single fish. I came here because I loved the lake and there were some fish, you know, that had been 15 years without capture. So, you know, targeting certain types of carp. Because obviously when I started carp fishing, I was just fishing for any carp. But, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love catching carp. I just like catching them from the environment that I want to be in. You know, if I had a bite now and I caught a 25 pounder or a 20 pounder, I'd be over the moon. I love catching carp and always have done. And, you know, long may that remain so. But I suppose there must have been a switch over point. I suppose it's a natural progression really, isn't it? You know, you fish just for fish. And then you want to catch a 20 pounder. So you go somewhere and you catch a 20 pounder, and then, you know, eventually a little way down the line, you want to catch a 30 pounder. So I went to Harefield to catch a 30 pounder. And that was also a big, proper gravel pit with bars and islands and everything. And I caught my 30 pounder. I caught two of them, 33 and 34 pound over a couple of years on there. And realised then how much, you know, I loved that style of angling. That, you know, fishing the second bars, trying to reach the third bars, working out the routes of the fish along the gravel and where they go. And there was more to it. There was a lot more to it. And I think that style of fishing then got into me. I realised how much I love gravel pit angling. It's not just, the lake doesn't have to be huge, but gravel pit is really what I do. That's what I like. I love fish, you know, I love the fact that there's bars, the fact that there's routes and islands and the way they've been dug and what's, you know, the channels and everything else that's out there makes it a lot more interesting than just a big flat bowl. I wouldn't be very good at reservoir fishing. I tried it recently. I was rubbish at it, just because it was boring. Yeah, so I suppose, you know, you target your 30s and then you hear of a specific one that lives in wherever and you want to catch that one. And the more time you spend fishing there, the more, you know, myths and legends you hear about and the more you hear about that particular fish and it sort of elevates it in your mind. And then one day you catch it and then you think, wow, you know, you get a big buzz out of it. And you think, I want to do that again, you know. So you find another target that you're happy fishing for, an environment that you like, and you do it again, and it just snowballs really. It just goes from one thing to another, and then you get to the stage where the harder it is, the more effort you put in to catching something, the bigger the buzz when you catch it. That's the way I look at it anyway. Maybe I'm just, I don't know, masochistic or something. The problem with obsession, and that's what it is. Make no bones about it. It is obsession. You know, you get that, like I said earlier, you get that tunnel vision. You get that you want to target something. It is an obsession. It's an addiction. And the problem is that the lines can get blurred around the edges of what you should be doing and what you want to be doing. And by that I mean, you know, I live in, I share my environment, my life with other people. And you have to keep balance. You really do have to keep a balance, you know, family, work, mainly family, and this. You know, the lines have become blurred between work and this because I make my living through various forms of fishing and filming and stuff within the industry. So that's you know, I'm happy that that's blurred. But yeah, sometimes your obsession gets carried away with you, and occasionally you sit there when you've just done an extra night or an extra 2 nights and you think, this isn't right. You know, I'm overstepping the boundary here. I'm pushing it. I'm pushing it to the limit, and you know, I'm getting the backing. I always get the backing, you know, from the missus and that. But sometimes in the back of your mind, you just think, nah, Laney, you're doing a wrong one here. You know, you are beyond the call of duty. You are pushing it So you have to rein yourself in a little bit, because it can take over, it really can. You know, not when I'm other places, not winter fishing, not, you know, middle of summer like this. It's, you know, I'm not that fussed either way. I want to be at the lake or a lake. But spring and autumn, I must be hell to live with in spring and autumn. You know, I'm just, if I am at home, I'm looking out the window, I'm looking at which way the tree's bending, I'm looking at the air pressure, I'm like looking at the moon phase. This is just there in spring and autumn, you know, and that must be a challenge for other people, it really must. But, you know, that's what I am and that's what I do, which is how I justify it to myself, which again is probably wrong, but, you know, as long as I can keep that yearly balance that I try and keep, then hopefully all will be sweet. So at the moment, as you can tell, middle of summer. To be honest, in my mind, probably one of the hardest times to catch fish. Obviously, winter's tricky, but if you get on them in winter in the right areas, apply a bit of bait, at least you know they're willing to feed at the right times. But now it's what, late July, it's 30 degrees. It's tricky because you know, you've got that little window of opportunity, probably 4 hours, something like that. Depends on what swim you're in. You know, different swims have different bite times. You know, I've got a thing about bite times. I really have got a bit of an obsession about bite times. But in general, across the board, you know, first light is obviously your best time that you're, you know, anywhere. First light's the one. Certain swims, depending on what you're fishing to, snags, weed beds, whatever, transit routes, you know, on these big pits. Certain swims might do different things, you know. There's a few swims on here which are generally night times, and in the morning, as soon as the sun comes up, they either follow the sun or run from the sun or whatever, but they disappear. But no, really tricky time of year. Spring and autumn, my favourite times. Middle of summer, yeah, not so much so, to be honest. I love being out here, sitting out here in the sun, pair of shorts, cold cider, you know. It ain't a bad way of earning your living, but as far as putting fish on the bank is concerned, you know, you can be sat here for 20 hours waiting for that little window of opportunity, only to find out you're in the wrong spot. But like I said, you know, that bite time and that my obsession with bite times, I've always had it. I'm like, if something gets caught, rather than, you know, finding out where it's been caught or what on or what rig, what bait, anything else, all I really want to know is what time did it get caught. And I build up a picture in my mind of the times that, you know, I think the fish are feeding week to week throughout the year. Middle of winter, for example, I think it's crucial, that bite time, absolutely crucial, because personally I feel there's only a certain time of the day that the fish are actually comfortable to go on the bottom, whether that's air pressure, temperature, whatever, you know, whatever the condition that affects the carp. I'm sure they feel that in their swim bladder, and they only become properly comfortable in their own body to go to the bottom of the lake for short periods of time, which is why you get quite intense and very, very sort of localised bite times. It can be half an hour. I remember when I was fishing down at Christchurch on the Lynch Hill complex, I'd go down there, I'd camp up in a bitterly cold middle of winter. It was ridiculously cold that winter I'd done on there, and the bite time was about half an hour. You start getting little liners. I can't remember what the time was, but I think it was 10 in the morning until 10:30. 10 o'clock, you start getting little liners. By 10:30, you'd either have had 1 or 2 or 3 fish, or you'd have been done, and then that was it until the next day, which is a lot of waiting about. Sometimes you get a couple of bite times in the winter. You know, you can get 12 hours apart. You know, you might get a 11 at night and an 11 in the morning. But if you fish enough on the same lake throughout the colder months especially, you'll see that there's a specific time when they feed. And when they're not down there, I'll fish all different levels and that, trying to get a bite. And it's the same pretty much throughout the year. Spring may be a little bit different. Spring, they're moving about. You know, if you move about with them, you can get bites here, there, and wherever at most times. Summer, they sort of get into, I think, they get into a sort of a feeding pattern, and they'll be down there feeding, like I say, you know, early hours in the morning. Autumn, again, it changes totally. You start getting bites after dark. You start getting them evening bites, you know. When you was a kid, you used to go fishing, and it was always just as the light was going, you'd start catching little commons or whatever you were fishing for. Always the best time. Not so much big carp fishing nowadays, evening bites, but in the autumn, evening can be good. Yeah, spring and autumn's varied, but summer and winter bite times are absolutely crucial, and I like to know exactly what's going on week to week and when the last fish was caught, what time of day, and I can't get it out of my head. I just think, you know, 8 a.m, 10 a.m, whatever. I'm looking at the clock all the time thinking, we've got 20 minutes of bite time left. Just the way I work. Right, big old swims like this are crucial on big pits. Obviously you've got, I don't know, what, 30 acres or something in front of you there. Vast expanse of water. If you haven't got a clue, these sort of places are good, like first thing in the morning, you know, when you're expecting the fish to show, just because you get so much more to look at. You know, you're looking at 4 or 5 different swims worth out here. Problem is, of course, first thing in the morning is showing time, first thing in the morning is bite time, and first thing in the morning is when you want to be looking around the rest of the lake, so you can't be everywhere at once. But if you've got no clue and the fish aren't in a showy mood with only the odd one popping its head out, then somewhere like this is always going to be a good bet. Always. Especially if it's nice and flat calm first thing in the morning. I do like it here. It's a bit of a range swim as it looks, you know. All the features are out there, way out there, but it's a good swim when the fish are here, same as everywhere else. When they're not, it's rubbish. Another thing about the bite time thing, why I think it's so important to know your bite times, is not so much as, you know, when you're going to get a bite, which is the obvious, is sort of when not to do things, you know, rather than when to do things. When not to bait up, you know, when not to take your boat out through your swim, when not to recast. You see it loads on, you know, waters that are busier, if you like. You know, anglers get up in the morning, you know, make a cup of tea, have a fag, fart, wander about, and then bored, and think, I'll have a recast. I'll get the marker out, see if it's any shallower and deeper than it was yesterday. And they start thrashing and they start baiting, and the problem is it's a chain reaction on a lot of busier waters. As soon as somebody puts some bait in, the next bloke thinks, God Christ, I've got to put some bait in. He's putting bait in, he's going to catch more than me, and it all starts, and it can just destroy the whole day because the bite time has been ruined by activity. And even on these sort of lakes where I'm in at the moment, I'm here, 140 acres, I am on my own. But I could destroy my own fishing, you know, by doing things at the wrong time of day, really. You know, tomorrow morning, I ain't expecting a bite, but if I get a bite, I'm expecting it to be, you know, from first light, which is what now, 4-ish, 4:30, something like that, till about 9. I reckon that's my window of opportunity on here. Now, I don't want to do anything in that time. If I see a fish show in that time, then I'm in a dilemma if it's not anywhere near where I'm fishing. I've got another rod made up over there with a like sort of a stiff tinge pop-uppy type thing, and a tractor rod, which I may consider putting on a showing fish. If I see 2 or 3 in an area, bang, they're having it. But basically what I want to do throughout the day, throughout now, I've done it already, but when it's like absolutely no hope of a bite whatsoever, and you think the fish have probably moved right under the snags or right into the weed, they're not very active, they're less likely to see you. You know, whether you're in a boat or whether you're casting or whether you're spodding or spomming or air bombing or whatever you're doing, when the fish are least likely to be disturbed because it's scorching hot and they're in their little hidey holes, that's when I want to get my traps out. And I'm doing that on the information that I've learnt this morning. You know, where my cane is for the middle rod, I saw a fish show there this morning, just randomly, just one fish, woof, came straight out, went back in. when it was hot, I went out there, you know, just before the cameras turned up, and had a donk about and found a lovely little clear spot right on the bottom. Deep water, rock hard, soft all around it. Put the cane there, came back, had a look and thought that is exactly where that fish showed. So that now in my mind, I'm thinking come bite time, you know, they might not be back, they might be nowhere near that again. I might never see another fish there, but I've got something to dial in on, I've got something to focus on. So that's that spot, you know, same day before, see a fish in that area, left-hand rod. I know they're using a snag over there. Wait until the middle of the day when they're right under the snag, get up close so I don't spook them, you know, as they're tucked away, find my little spot, as far away from bite time as I can. Heat of the day, 30 degrees, you know, they're unlikely to bolt away from me, they can't be bothered, you know, it's too hot for them, it's too hot for me. But I've gone out there in the blazing sun, done all my rods, and now they're just gonna stay there. I am not gonna touch those rods at all. And then 4 o'clock tomorrow morning, which is probably 12, 13 hours away, I'm going to be up hovering, thinking now's the time, you know, 4, 5 till 9. If nothing's happened at 9, it's all over, you know, I've picked the wrong 3 spots. But at least I know that I haven't cooked it by doing stuff at bite time. Bite time is crucial. You know when to expect them bites. You know not to bait up at those times. You know not to cast at those times. To already, yeah, otherwise you could just turn up at a lake, couldn't you? If I knew the bite time was 5 a.m, I could turn up at 4 a.m. and just go plop, bang, catch one, thank you, goodbye, and go home. But that don't happen, because doing that is going to disturb the fish. You have to already be in position with your bait settled, your rig settled, your lines down. It has to be a no disturbance zone, and you just have to gamble that you've picked the best zone you can when bite time rolls around. There is another dimension to you know, picking your spots. Your bite times are your bite times. You know, it's not in stone. It really isn't. And like I said before, different swims on the same lake will fish at different times for different reasons. But also, if you're targeting specific fish, they may have an agenda, you know. I've fished lakes before where the big one's never been caught in the edge, for example, you know. It's not something that's set in stone, because there's always that one day when it does something different. Like two-tone, for example, you know, I was told it only ever gets caught on bright and smelly sort of attractor baits. It never gets caught in the edge, it's always out in the lake, and that did seem to be the situation. That's how I caught it. You know, I got Mainline to make me a sort of frutella bait that was of a decent profile, protein bait, and you know, within a very short space of time, I caught that fish. So that's the way I approached it. But then it got caught in the edge on sweet corn. You know, totally out of character, and it wasn't the only time. So you can't write things off, but you can narrow the field a little bit if certain fish that you're targeting have certain habits, you know, certain places they like to be at certain times of the day. On here, it's a strange scenario, because I am targeting certain fish, but they're integrated with the stock fish. There's quite a few stockies in there. They're lovely fish, don't get me wrong, beautiful fish, and growing as well, growing really well. But they're integrated. So, you know, you're gonna get them, and I don't want to say they're sillier, stupider, whatever, but they've had a shorter life, so they're not quite as adept at dealing with stuff. If you get a mixed group going there, basically you're probably going to catch a stocky first. These fish ain't silly. As soon as something gets hooked, the rest of them are gone. You know, it's bite and move on here most of the time, which makes it very, very difficult to target those specific fish. But like I say, on some places you may see a certain big fish under a certain snag. And if the next week you see that same big fish under that same snag, and this is a pattern, then that helps you to sort of dial in on where that big fish goes at a certain time of day, and to be there again. You know, before he arrives, get your rig in there, get everything nice and quiet, and hope that on his way in or out of that snag, weed bed, whatever it may be, you know, you might get that little chance that you want. There's a lot of little there's so many little details, so many little fine lines that go into catching a big fish, and sometimes it comes about just by luck, really. You know, luck's a big thing as well. You know, I've had big fish that have just come along. You know, I've been fishing. I haven't done a massive campaign on a lake. I haven't figured it out. I mean, back when I was on St Ives Lagoon, way back when I caught the Fat Lady, which was big fish, 52, I think I had it. It went on to be, I believe it went on to 60 pound. I think I did 3 sessions. I think it amounted to 10 nights, you know, and I had the biggest and the second biggest in the lake. And I ain't saying that to say, wow, look at me, how good I am, because there was a lot of luck involved, you know. I saw fish, I moved on fish, fair enough, but that's basic carp angling, isn't it? I had 3 bites, I had a 24 and the 2 biggest fish in the lake. That's sometimes the way it goes, you know, 3 sessions, bish, bosh, bang, away you go. So there is that luck element. You know, I mean, to be honest, you know, look at the Burghfield Common. You know, yes, I put myself in a good position. Yes, I hacked a swim out of the undergrowth because I thought that was, you know, I didn't think that was where I was going to catch the Burghfield Common from. I just thought that was a better angle to fish for where I'd seen fish on a regular basis. I'd only been there, it was only 10 weeks into my season on there. And I caught the Burghfield Common. You know, I wasn't targeting the Burghfield Common. I wanted to catch the Burghfield Common, don't get me wrong. But I didn't make that swim because that was where the Burghfield Common lived. I made that swim because there was a lot of fish showing there. And quite often, the best way to get that target fish, in my mind, is to catch everything. Just catch as many carp as you can, and it'll come along. Quite often, the big one is the biggest feeder, is the greediest one. Not so in here. They don't seem to eat anything in here, the big ones. But, you know, on a lot of lakes, you know, that big one can, not necessarily the easiest, but if you get in the right area where you sim fish, give them bait, keep giving them bait, get something going, the big one's going to come along. And, you know, like I did at Burghfield, that's the way I fish a lot of the time. I try and catch as many fish as I can, and just play the numbers, really, you know, just play the percentages. Eventually, it's going to come along. The one you want's going to come along. So here we are, we're on K1 now, still in RK water. See me throughout this film on Wraysbury 1, Wraysbury 2, which is just over the back there, and now on K1. There's one thing you're going to see in common, I'll chat to you about it in more detail in a minute, and that's the bait. I've been on the same bait on all 3 waters, summer or winter, and very similar rigs as well, to be honest. If something works, keep using it. Right, let's pop him back. Nice one. Okay, now it's all quietened down a little bit on the fishing front. I said I'd show you what I'm using, and I will. As you've seen earlier in the film, the new test bait that I've been using now for the best part of 3 years, to be honest. Well happy with that. But as this lake sees an awful lot of cell, I've got the cell on as well. In fact, I've got a blend of both in here. So I've run all my bait through a chopper. I've adapted my chopping mechanism so that I get some whole ones, some half ones, and a lot of dust as well. Mix the 2 baits together and give them the whole lot a good coating of the smart liquid, just to give it a little sort of liquid extra boost. So on a lake like this, it's well established with a bait like the cell. I've got the bonus of the cell, and I've also got the advantage of something new and a little bit special. And like I say, with the liquids, I mean, just sitting here, I've really got that smell coming off of that. And all the little crumbs and that will be sat in the bottom of the lake. Keeps them grubbing about longer if you can get them down there to feed.
So, although visually different and slightly different in smell and taste, they're both designed in the same way to do the same job. They're both a high food source bait, very good for the fish, activated by water, which means once they're, you know, at the bottom of the lake, they're starting to break down and give off all the signals into the water column. So, multi-size items, 2 different baits, total confidence for me.
You know, and once I've got that sort of in my mind, the areas that carp go to on a big pit, you know, I'm talking big pit angling here, and when they're feeding and what have you, you know, obviously part of that equation, a big part of that equation is bait, but more than what bait is the application of bait. Now, yeah, I ain't gonna lie, I've got access to as much bait as I want, yeah? I've got a boat down there. I could go out there and I could put out a ridiculous amount of bait in a great big, I could put a marker cane out there, I could keep coming in this swim, I could put hundreds of kilos of boilies out there. You know, I could use pellets, I could use this, I could use everything. I know on this specific lake, it wouldn't do me any good whatsoever. You know, most of it would lay uneaten because as soon as I hook the first fish, they're gone. So it's getting that balance in your head. People always think, oh, you know, and people say, you know, that other anglers, oh, they just get loads of bait and they've got loads of time, whatever. It's not like that. It doesn't work like that. The fish are specific to their site specific, you know, the way they feed in a certain lake. Sonning, for example. Sonning, they couldn't get enough bait. You couldn't put too much bait in there. But the lake was also full of double figure bream, and I mean rammed full of double figure bream. You know, you'd get half a dozen in a night, 10, 12, 14, 15 pound, great big slabs. They were eating a lot of bait, and the carp would come in and get attracted to this, and then you'd have 2 or 3 carp mixed in throughout the night with these bream. It was a bait scenario, you know, it was absolutely perfect for bait application, as much as you could put in, and that's exactly what I did. I put hideous amounts in there and I caught and caught and caught. But had I done that once or twice and not caught, I just think I'm just polluting the swim, you know, I am just ramming in loads of bait and absolutely nothing is happening, or I'm getting the odd fish but then the catch rates are dropping. There's bait left out there, you know. Like I say, access to as much bait as I want. Sometimes I use very, very little. Regular baiting with small amounts of bait in the right area. Going back to what I said earlier, if you know where one of your targets is going, yeah, you might want to put 10 baits down there, but you might want to put 10 baits down there as often as possible, every day if you could, if you live close enough, and if not, just as often as you could, 2 or 3 times a week, because you might be feeding that one fish. You might come in, have a little graze about and then go off to in the snag or wherever he goes, and that's enough. If you suddenly then put 20 kilos of boilies down there, that's not going to catch you any more fish, you know. That's just going to ruin that spot. You're going to come in the next time and think, oh my god, what's going on here, I'm out of here, and take a different route. I see it on lakes like this, you know, on boat lakes. A lot of people that aren't so used to fishing these big lakes that come on to somewhere like this, or other lakes where you can use boats. A boat, you know, they get out there and they think, oh, what I've always wanted to do is put a load of bait out. You know, I haven't been able to spom it all out there. I think in a lot of minds, boats, and baiting sort of equate to France and French fishing. And, you know, I've seen people go out there and rip the lid off a bucket and just give it that with about 20 kilos of whatever on a little tiny spot. Now, at the end of the day, these carp are English carp and they feed like English carp. They're never going to eat that in a million years. That's just not happening. So it's easy to overcook it by just thinking more bait equates to more carp, which it doesn't, you know. Sensible baiting, regular baiting, that's how to break down the defences of carp. I've got a couple of swims going on here. They're dead now, you know. I mean, I fished them in the spring. I had them absolutely rocking. The fish won't go anywhere near them anymore. They've just decided that we're done with that. We don't go there anymore. But at the time, I was just feeding them all the time, small amounts, regular. They were coming in. You know, I was only fishing over about 20 baits. I'd have a bite, I'd put another 20 baits. I'd have a bite, I'd put another 20 baits. And when I went home, I'd put 2 kilos, you know, to keep them going for 4 days. And then I'd come back and I'd put 20 baits. And it worked really well for me. And then one day they just thought, bang, we're done. I haven't seen a fish in that swim. There's a snag you can climb in and you can sort of look down and see what it is you're fishing for. I used to see them in there all the time. I haven't seen a fish in there for nearly 6 weeks, at least 5 weeks. Not a single fish of any description. No carp, no roach, no perch, nothing. And all the branches that were shiny where the fish are going in, and as they go in, obviously, you know, the movement of their fins, they scratch on the branches, rub on the branches. It was, you could see the roots on the bottom, you know, the transit roots. You could see the clear spot where they flashed up on the bottom. Now they're just all hung in some sort of algae and stuff. There's weed coming up off the branches and this blur hanging down off the bottom, and you just look and you think that's a no-go area. You know, you're done with that. So you can't force big pit fish to stay in any one area. You can encourage it, and like I did at Sonning, I created an area that they came to every night on the worst conditions, back of the wind, whatever, they came there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And the crack is, unfortunately, is trying to figure out which one you've got, you know, because there are no set rules. There are absolutely no set rules. All carp, all fish, you know, they're a living creature. They've got their own minds. It's only the size of a pea, but they've got their own minds and they'll make up their own minds, you know, whether they want this, whether they want that, whether they want a little bit all the time, whether they want a great big bed of it. If they're willing to risk feeding on a big bed of it, some fish are scared stiff of a big bed of bait. Other fish just crash in there and have the lot. You know, I mean, the crack is deciding, what have I got? When you're fishing these sort of pits, I've covered, you know, your bite times and your baiting and everything else. There is one thing that is really, really important, and that's confidence. And I don't mean confidence that you're going to catch. You know, a lot of the time I think, I ain't going to catch. You know, I look at the conditions, I look at the previous couple of days, and I think there ain't a lot of chance of a bite. But what I mean by confidence is confidence that if there is a chance of a bite, everything is right. You cannot go on these vast pits and be second guessing yourself. You can't sit here and think, should I put it on a coated braid, hook link? Should I be using a mono? You know, should it be a pop-up? Should it be a bottom bait? You know, should I have a back lead? There's nothing you can be questioning in your setup. You've set your traps. You've waited 20 hours for that magical little window to come around. You can't then sit there and scratch your head and think, have I got it right? You've got to do the best you can. You've got to have, I mean, I'm quite simple anyway, but I'm quite simple with my approach. You know, I've only got a couple of rigs that I use. I don't swap and change stuff. I've come to I don't want to say a level, that sounds like, you know, I've come to a place where I'm happy with certain ways that I fish in certain scenarios, you know, and on a big pit, I know what rig I want to use. I know what lead arrangement I want to use. I know what bait I want to use. I know what baiting I hope I know what baiting strategy, or if not, I'll figure that out, that I want to use. And only if you look at your bait, you know, you've got your bait out there. The bait is the first, that's the first bit that's got to be right, isn't it? You know, Mr. Carp comes in, if he don't want what you've got on the end, then the rest of it don't really matter, does it? You know, and I've got confidence in bait, obviously. I don't want to make a Mainline ad out of it, but everybody in the world knows that I've been on Mainline since they started. You know, and I'm happy to open the bag and use what they give me. I mean, like on here, for example, you know, I'm testing a bait. And that in itself, you think, you know, I'm fishing a rock hard water and I'm testing a bait. I've been on it this is my 3rd year on a test bait. But I know it works. I've caught a load of fish on it, you know, but I knew it would work before I even started using it. I've got that confidence in my supply of bait. I've got that confidence in my supply of hooks and line and clips and jangly bits and everything else, you know. All of that's sorted for me. You know, I look at it, it's like a massive jigsaw in my mind. And you know, your bait's one piece, your rigs are another piece, your line angles, you know, the understanding of the weather conditions, the depths, the bars, the weed, you know, whatever. They're all pieces of a jigsaw. And the only bit that I really like to have left to fit in every week is the location bit. It's a big bit, you know, location is a big bit. But if that's the only piece of the jigsaw every week that I've got to plop in there and I can look and think, oh, jigsaw's finished, then I'm expecting to buy it. So confidence in everything, confidence in my approach, and never second guessing myself. You know, I may have it wrong, but you have to sit here and be happy in here and think, you know, I'm fishing the best I possibly can, and then it's come what may. It's down to the carp then, isn't it? Come on, carp. Yeah, they're still out there waiting for the common.
Oh yes, look at that one. That's it.
Okay.
Hang on, mate, just do that again.
Oh, that's it. That's the cover shot.
See that, baby?
Oh, it's in the wag of the tail.